Hey, welcome to Solidarity Talks. I'm Vikki Reynolds, and I'm honored to be here today with Robert Taylor and Kevin Parker, two people that I've been in solidarity with for decades now and learned a lot from and alongside and with each other. We are on the territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people here in what is called Vancouver, Canada. As part of a land acknowledgement, you know, especially for me as a white settler, I'm a white settler, my people are from Ireland and England. I need to acknowledge colonization in this moment, how I am implicated from that, what's required of me. And I'm thinking about all of the solidarity movements with the Ukraine who've been invaded by Russia. And I'm problematizing that and wondering about where is that solidarity for Indigenous people whose territories have been invaded right here where we're standing, and how the military has been called out against Wet'suwet'en and other nations doing land defense. Just today, I wrote a letter to the Attorney General here, taking a position in resisting a bunch of women, Indigenous women and elders who've been charged with crimes who are just defending their territory. So while many Canadians are applauding and saying they're in solidarity with the Ukraine, the very same things are happening by our government to Indigenous people that we are implicated in. So it's solidarity. That means you see the connections of things and you see that our liberation is tied to each other. So I just need to problematize that in this moment. And also as a white person who grew up in Toronto, in a conversation today with two Black men around anti-Black violence and resistance to that, just acknowledging, you know, that yesterday a report came out from the Toronto police themselves, you know, and police don't usually say bad cop, no donut, saying that there is systemic racism against Black people in the Toronto policing, not naming clearly enough the way strip searching and violence and some deaths have happened. None of that got named. They just said they're more likely to be subjected to police. And this, of course, was responded to beautifully by Beverly Baines, a Black activist and professor, I believe, with No Pride in Policing, talking about how this was not an apology to the Black community. This is not how you make repair in the Black community. And Beverly Baines also said that she believed that the police chief was just apologizing to the members of the police force who have been called racists, and saying it's just systemic trouble, as if they weren't doing particular actions, and saying that what she and her community are calling for is defunding the police, not retraining them on anti-Black racism and stuff. So that's kind of some of the intersections of the time in which we're speaking. And it's a beautiful time for us to have this conversation. So yeah, Robert, so that's who, so I'm a clinical supervisor. I just work to try to keep workers alive in context of oppression, of necropolitics, policies that kill, and structural abandonment. That's what I do. And Robert, it's lovely to have you. And Kevin, welcome. Just really respect you both. We've been in solidarity with each other for decades, and I'm just really humbled and honored that we're having an opportunity to bring forward some of your wisdom and bring it forward. So Robert, why don't you take some space to lay out some of who you are?
Thank you, Vikki, and thank you, Kevin. So I'm Robert Taylor. I am a stolen person on the stolen lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. I was lucky enough for a Indigenous friend, a mutual friend of all of ours, to let me know that is my designation on these lands. Very different than, say, a white settler's experience on this land. I also intersect as a queer Black man. I'm from Ontario, just like Vikki. And, you know, listening to Vikki kind of reflect on what Beverly said, you know, I definitely one of those people that were impacted in living in Toronto in regards to the police officers there. And I almost forgot what they're called. I think it's the Toronto, what is the Toronto Police's designation? Whatever.
Is it the OPP?
No, that's
no.
Ontario Provincial.
Well, whatever they're called, you know, I was definitely impacted by them many times throughout my life. One of the reasons why I'm here in Vancouver was to get away from that experience. But of course, no matter where you go, there you are. So haven't dealt with it as much here, but still deal with it. You know, I always have to look both ways if I see a police car, just because I'm uncomfortable. I work in senior leadership for a nonprofit organization. With that, you know, thinking that moving forward would make life easier, but it comes with its own new set of challenges. But I'm definitely up for the challenge, and I'm looking for some change. And so that's me. I'm going to pass it on to my friend Kevin Parker.
Thanks, Robert. My name is Kevin Parker. I am also a stolen person on stolen lands of the Coquitlam people. I am a person who identifies with some lived experience around substance use for many, many, many years. I've also have some lived experience around incarceration in different prisons around BC, spending, I don't know, probably maybe 7 to 8 years total in different institutions. I also work for the same organization as Robert. We kind of do the same thing. He just gets paid a little bit more than me. I've been in leadership for this organization for probably about 7 years now, and I've only been with the organization about 9 or 10. It's been a pretty good experience. You know, today I want to talk about a whole bunch of things. I think it's really important that we can come together and talk about what it's like for people like me and Robert to live where we live, to wake up and put our shoes on, or put our flip-flops on, or put whatever on, and go out and what it kind of looks like in a day in a life, and or a lifetime of being a Black person in Vancouver. I'm born and raised in Vancouver, which has caused me, you know, many, many, many challenges, and a lot of my I'd say my trauma and my past lifestyle behaviors were because of the racism in this province. I know for sure, as getting older and digging deep into trying to, you know, sort out some of my stuff, for sure, being Black, just by being Black was you know, 80% of the reason why I chose some of the unhealthy decisions to try to cope with, you know, what I was going through growing up. So yeah.
I'm just wondering what you're thinking about that, Robert. You came to these territories but grew up somewhere else.
Yeah, you know, listening to Kevin, it really kind of breaks my heart, because I know Kevin quite well. He has the biggest heart, one of the most kindest people. I don't know anyone who'll say anything negative about this man. So knowing the history of incarceration, you know, substance use, which I also, and I tend to always forget because our lives are so huge with so many pieces, but I've experienced the same thing. It's around numbing the pain in regards to what happens in our lives, and also not having access to the things that are out there that everybody else has access to. So we have to do the things that we need to do. And then at the end of the day, we blame ourselves for everything because the system is broken, you know? So for me, listening to you, Kevin, I know who you are under different circumstances and different situations. I don't know if we'd be different people, because I like the people we are, but I don't think that history would be there with you, because you're a great person. You're magnificent, but I'm glad you're sharing those pieces, because they're very important within our community. You know, like, I don't know, I've had my dealings with the police. I don't know any Black person that hasn't had dealings with the police, you know, which is sad. And no matter where we go, whether it's across the country, to another country, to another continent, we are dealing with the same experience no matter where we are. And the one thing, if I'm going to discontinue a little bit more focused on Kevin just for an extra second, is, you know, what I love, I think, the most about you, Kevin, is the way you intersect with the Indigenous communities. You're a bridge, you know, supporting our wonderful friend Rachel and a ton of other people. And for you, they're just your friends, but it's so much more because we cross over in so many places. So, yeah.
Thanks, Robert.
Yeah, I think witnessing that kind of solidarity is really important as well. I wondered if you wanted to talk a little bit about what it is like to be Black in leadership, because you're both folks that have some influence, have been in there, are training and mentoring other people, are involved in structures and with wider communities to try to get society to do the right thing in terms of shelter, housing, overdose prevention sites. Just what is the part of the experience about being Black that you most want to bring forward?
Kevin, do you want to go, or
Yeah,
would you
sure,
like?
I can go.
Okay.
I think, you know, from my experience, there's been so many different, there's layers to it. You know, there's there's a timeline, and then there's layers, and it's changed. Like it changes all the time on how I see it, where I fit in, how I feel about it. I mean, when I first started, it was not great. I mean, put it this way, everybody was mad that I got the position I got. Everybody around me. Not the Indigenous folks, not my Indigenous coworkers, not the people that I, kind of, but I'm gonna just name it. Some of the white folks that I was working with weren't happy about it. You know what I mean? And they were voicing it, and it was uncomfortable. But you know what? It was I didn't expect anything different. It's the kind of this shit I've been dealing with since I was a kid. So, being on a soccer team, if I got the MVP of the team, all the other people would look at, they were angry. They've always been angry about everything that I was successful in. You know what I mean? But so with that, what it's like kind of sometimes is in the beginning, it was like I always felt like I always second guess myself, because that's the energy that was portrayed onto me. Like I wasn't confident enough, or I wasn't good enough to do this job, but I had some very strong leaders, and Tara was the first person who hired me into a leadership position, and that person helped change my life. You know what I mean? For numerous different reasons. And I've told her, but I don't know how much she really understands it. It changed my life because it just gave me confidence, and she brought me to space with white leaders or other leaders that I couldn't bring myself to, because nobody would hire me. And she did that and gave me a voice. I mean, gave me a space to use my voice, and I used my voice in those spaces. And I was, at first I was anxious, I was nervous. It was strange. It was different. But over time, I just got more confident in myself. And the organization I work for, they're pretty progressive when it comes to giving people of color an opportunity to be in leadership. As I work for a housing organization, and we house tons of people of color, tons of Indigenous folks. So why would you not want to have people of color, Indigenous folks, leading the staff teams that are supporting these folks? So it only made sense. But I mean, I'm in a different place now, 8 years later, and I've been sitting in these conversations. I opened up this new housing program, which is, a whole new model of care. And so with this whole new model of care, I got to sit at way different tables, from the provincial government level, all the way to the people that are doling out the money, and asking us, as Indigenous and Black leaders, what do you think, you need to make this model work, to create care, to create better care for the folks that you're serving. So it's different sitting at those tables for sure, because you're sitting with the people that are gonna able to make the decisions, because those are the people with money, right? So it was different. It's been different, but it's also been pretty good. Like I don't feel in some of those meetings, like I noticed there's more people of color in these meetings these days, and they're starting to reach out to more different organizations and ask for, solutions to a lot of these problems that we have around the opiate poisoning, around the obviously the homeless issue that we have, the mental health issues that people are suffering, and so being in these positions, there was layers to it. It started off pretty rocky, but it's getting better for me personally. I can say that. But I know Robert's in a different position than me, so it's tricky. I won't speak for Robert about his actual experience in the position that he's in, but I know getting to where I got to wasn't easy, and I know for sure getting to Robert where he is right now definitely wasn't easy, because I watched it, and I don't know if Robert minds me saying, but there were some struggles to where he got, and I mean he wasn't fairly fair, as always, like Black folks, we're not fairly, picked or chosen for a position or hired for a position. We got to fucking fight. Excuse my language. We got to fight for these positions like other people don't have to. You know what I mean? I know that's what Robert had to do, and I did that with him, for him. At the same, I know. So yeah, I don't know.
I want to go back to when you said, when Tara Taylor first made some space for you in leadership. I love that you said she gave me a voice, and then you correctly said she didn't give me a voice.
Yeah.
Good person working as an ally or doing the solidarity movement doesn't give you a voice, but made space for your voice. But you did not expect anything other than a backlash about a Black leadership, even from folks, and these are workers that are working with exploited, harmed folks. These are people with a pretty good political analysis, right? And yet you still got that backlash about Black leadership. And I'm just wondering, given that you knew that was coming, why did you sign up for this shit? And it costs so hugely. And I'm just wondering, what is it about you that has you able to do that?
I think it comes from, so my history with substance use, like I had a really tough time as a kid. You know what I mean? I grew up in this in BC, like I was the only other Black people in the school. The only other Black people in my neighborhood were my siblings, or like my kid, like my family, my cousin, my brother, my sister. We have a different dad, so my sister's white. So I mean, I was the only other Black person. There was no Black people around. So and that's in the 70s, early 80s. So growing up, I was just throwing punches left. I was blocking, dodging, fighting my whole life, one way or another, for everything. So when lots of harm was created by different reasons, lots of racism, lots of harm was created. We had some family stuff, and I was heartbroken as a young kid, period. Like I would just say I was heartbroken, you know what I mean? And when I get heartbroken, I don't like to feel that. So I at an early age, I went to substances, and that went a long way. I mean, all the way to using really, really, really powerful illicit street drugs on the downtown east side for, I think it was 12 years I was stuck down there, but I used a long time before I even got there. And I was doing all those things in and out of prisons, but somehow and people ask me, how did I change my life? So that was almost 14 years ago that I've used, those types of substances that were harming me at the time. And they weren't, the consequences of those substances weren't great for me. But I mean, somehow I was able to climb out of that with some support from other people. And I think I never thought I could, right? I thought for sure I'm going to die in one of these alleys, or I'm going to die in one of these cells, or I'm going to die by one of these officers are going to run me over. They're going to shoot me. Like, I don't know. They're going to leave me in one of these parks one day that they drop me off in, and nobody knows I'm there. So like, it wouldn't be easy for them. You know what I mean? So anyways, just somehow I cleaned my life up. I got sober. And once I did that, I gained some of my power back a bit, I think, and then from that day forward, that was in 2009. From that day forward, I felt a bit of strength that I didn't know that I had. So when I was offered that job, even I knew there was going to be backlash, I didn't want to back down, right? And I wanted to pave the way for people, there were so many people that I had met along my journey that struggled so hard. Their hearts were broken just like mine. And I knew they wanted better for themselves, but they didn't know how to get that strength. And so I knew I could pass that strength to people. And that's why I didn't back down, because I knew I needed to try to change the way the systems work and the way the structures work. And I know no one's going to do that but me as a Black man, or Robert as a Black man, or Rachel as an Indigenous woman, or like we are the people who need to do that. So once I got into that space, I didn't care. I wasn't going to let, all my life I let people knock me back and make me fight and maybe lose numerous fights or whatever the situation was. I wasn't going to let that happen once I got to this space, once I felt like I had a little bit more strength. So awesome. I wasn't going to back down.
Awesome. And how about for you, Robert, just what's been your experience of Black leadership, a queer man in Black leadership?
Yeah. So I kind of have to, I was going to just go from my current moment, but then I realized that I need to start just a slightly earlier. So I think I met Vikki in 2007, between 2007 and 2009. Like, it feels like a million years ago. And coming from Ontario, the reason I was out here was to do kind of some self-work, some reflective work and understanding who I am. So I had a friend that was living out here. His family was out here. So I said, I'd come out here for the summer, take a course. Met Vikki, had no idea who Vikki was. Vikki was just Vikki. And I'll just have to say it, it's very similar to Tara. Vikki saw me, like we had some really great conversations. Even when I was done the courses, there was times that I spoke to you about different things and you were able to, be in solidarity with me around some of the struggles, because I worked at a couple of different organizations prior to coming to Rain City. So that was kind of the start of my journey. I think I had gone back to Ontario after the courses I took with Vikki, and Vikki was like, you should do this as a profession. And I was like, there's no way I can do this as a profession. And so I went back to Ontario, and all I had is Vikki in my ear, thinking what she had said. I said, a different life, something else, not just always feeling down, not always just feeling depressed, And so I packed up my bag a couple months later, came out here and took some more courses with you. And from there, that kind of branched into working with various organizations. And then the current organization I work with seemed the best fit. It had all types of folks, all the queer intersex, all the different cultures, all the different nationalities. And so for me, it was the ideal fit. I felt like I could be myself. But of course, like with all things, there's some greatness to it, but there was also another side to it, like with all things. Was working at a program in the downtown east side for a long time. Definitely wasn't thinking about moving into management. Something happened at our location where our manager had to be gone for a long period of time. Again, I wasn't the first person they thought about to move into a management position. They actually, went to a white person, and we had a couple of BIPOC staff that were at the location, and they were like, we don't like this because you're always supporting us when things are going on. You should be continuing doing this, but in a more official sense. And so they had me advocate for myself, which I never do. And I think I spoke to Aaron, somebody that we all know at the time. And Aaron was like, yep, you're right. So I'm going to have you guys co-manage. And so me and the other person co-managed for a short period of time. And then that person moved on, and I moved very quickly from a supervisor to assistant manager to a manager. And during those times, I still think the organization were really hesitant on believing that I was capable of doing more, and I think by the time the manager returned to that position, it ended up being 2 years. And during that time, I was able to show who I was, and then was offered a position out in Chilliwack. That got a little crazy. It was supposed to be just one program, and I was supposed to be there temporarily for 3 months. It ended up being 2 years. And that came with a lot of challenges being in the Chilliwack community. There's a lot of racism out that way. And being a queer Black man being out that way was terrifying. I said, why me? Of all people, why wouldn't you ask somebody else to do that? I still did it because I thought it was important that I go out there, and not because of just having the job, but letting people see that change is possible. Yeah, I knew that there wasn't a lot of people of color in leadership out there. Actually, when I got out, there was none. So being able to go to big meetings, it's very similar to what Kevin's talking about with all the folks in the Fraser Valley area. It felt like going to the Last Supper, because I was like the only Black person, only person of color at this entire table. And you could see everybody just looking at me. And I had to remind myself, sit up with strengths, sit up with some power, don't let them see you sweat. And, I was able to manage through that. But I think I was really prepared to be at those tables because I was lucky enough to have a wonderful director support me. I had Bronwyn at one point, and then Laura Karen was another director that supported me. So I was able to come to that table with strength. Did that for 2 years, then came back to the city and was working at a program temporarily as a manager. And during that time, there was a little bit of an uproar. And I think this is where I have to kind of pull Kevin in. So we started to do some anti-racism work with the organization. And of course, at that time, it was just Kevin, myself, and another friend of ours that were in leadership positions at the time, but we're very frustrated and really couldn't speak our piece in the way that we would like to within the organization. So they had a consultant come in, and we were able to have some great discussions with the consultant. Then I think Bronwyn brought somebody else in for us to talk to as well, because the city was doing some work. So we really realized how angry and frustrated we were with the lack of diversity in the organization, and also where we were in our current roles, feeling like we had offered a lot to the organization. And definitely we don't expect things, but I feel like we worked hard enough that, you know, we should be moving forward. And so what ended up happening, and thanks to Kevin and the BIPOC community, is why I'm in the position. It wasn't because they're like, hey, Robert, you're ready for senior leadership, even though Bronwyn, who is a white woman, had told them, and Laura, who had told them, and she's a white woman. It wasn't enough. What I had was the BIPOC community fight for me, you know, alongside Alan, and say, hey, you know, we need to put somebody in the senior leadership space. And again, for me, I was like, it can't be me. I don't know what I'm going to do in this space. But it ended up that I was in this space. Kevin has been a wonderful support while I'm being in that space. I think we're closer now than we were before, because we have to talk about a lot of things. But it has been definitely a challenge, you know, in some ways. And I think I mentioned this to my boss the other day. I said, you know, this is not what I expected with senior leadership. I thought I would have some autonomy and some freedom to do the things that I would like to do, or input. But I actually feel like there's more of a leash on my neck now that I'm in this space. And, you know, she agreed, but it wasn't what I thought it would be, you know, and I feel like I have to prove myself every day in those spaces. And it's interesting because I'll come up with some ideas at the senior leadership table. And, you know, in the moment, everybody's like, oh, well, I don't know about that. 2 months down the road, they're using that idea. And it happens constantly. And of course, with no acknowledgement, which I'm fine. But it's just interesting that they can't accept the idea from you. And I think it's because I'm a Black man being at that table. If we're talking about anti-racism, they definitely want to hear my input. And I'm not a professional in those spaces, except for my own personal experience, but they'll listen. But when it comes to other things, they don't want to listen, but then they will use those ideas at some point. I think it's been a bit of a challenge for me because when I was coming to senior leadership, the agreement was I would be moving into a director's position as soon as there was some availability. And I'm a senior manager. And so when the availability came, that didn't change. And that was the agreement. And I didn't push on it, but I was disappointed because with the structure that is there, you know, they created a senior manager's position. Senior manager, in some ways, you don't have any powers. You have a whole bunch of directors over top of you telling you what to do. And at the end of the day, their decision is final. So you don't have that input, or you don't have that strength to make the change that you may see is needed. But one thing I am happy with is we are doing some focus on Black managers, Black employees. And so we have another consultant, and she does this affinity work. And that I have the freedom to kind of work with folks the way I want. And as soon as people start pushing that boundary and trying to step into those spaces, I push back. I'm like, we know our experiences. I'll hear from Kevin. I will hear from Fabricia. They can tell me whatever they want. They can tell me I'm doing something awful, and I will say, yes, what do you need me to do? But I don't want the rest of you guys coming and stepping in places that you don't understand and try to tell us what we need, you know, because we know what we need, right? So there has been some challenges. Some days I struggle with feeling like, is it the right fit for me? You know, you feel like you're not qualified at moments for whatever reason. And I'm sure it's very similar to what Kevin was saying. You don't know if it's the appropriate fit, but I'll still stay. And I'm going to stay in those spaces because we need that type of representation. And since Kevin and myself and a friend of ours, Fabricia, she wouldn't mind me mentioning her name, have been in our positions, there's been an explosion for BIPOC managers movement. So more Indigenous managers have moved into position, or Indigenous employees have moved into management position, and Black employees is a large number. And we realized that if we were to step out of these positions, I don't know if that would continue. So yeah, that's my experience so far. I'm still weighing, you know, what this position looks like.
Robert, I had no idea that you credit me with so much of what you've done. So I just want to it's great. And Tara Taylor's been fantastic, Kevin. But, you know, this conversation could replicate that kind of white supremacy where we talk about what great white allies you've had, and that's why you're doing okay, right? I want to center your Black solidarity. How is it that the two of you, because I know it's been battles that you've been in together, yeah, and with other people, how have you shouldered each other up? How has your solidarity as Black people help make these changes for all of us?
I'll go ahead, Robert. So I'm going to tell you a couple little stories. So I don't know. Me and Robert ended up in, I think, leadership like sort of right around the same time. So like in middle management where I am sort of now. And we used to have these monthly meetings where we'd meet at head office and all the managers would be there. And then you would funnel in around 10 a.m. You'd have bagels on the table, you sip coffee, and everybody was chit chatting and setting up the PowerPoint. And I would sit down and I would look across and I would see the first couple. I see Robert. I'm like, I know this guy. You know what I mean? And Robert, I could see he's looking at me like, I know that guy too. And but when I know somebody, it's not from work. I know it's not from work. I mean, not from this current job. And then a couple months went by, and Robert came up to me and he said, "I remember Robert." He said, "You know where?" He says, "I know you." And then he says, "You know where I know you from?" And it was Robert's current job. He was at one of his, his past jobs that he was at. I was actually on parole in the halfway house where he was working across the street. And then it all clicked to me. I was like, I remembered then, I used to go across the street and I'd smoke, and Robert would be, he worked in, I think it was a shelter we were working in at the time, but it was connected with the same agency, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, so that's how me and Rob, and then, but since that day, it was weird. It just took that minute. We were connected in a different way since that day. And then moving forward, how we shoulder each other up is everything. It's how I stay in the work, period. Like Robert was my person, I have more support with Black folks in the organization now because of Robert. Like Robert was my person. Like Robert was, so our organization is so big. So Robert was in different positions, like out this way and out that way and stuff, and worked downtown. I worked out in Olympic Village, not out, but it's away from downtown. Yeah. It's quite different. So Robert's seeing different employees than I am, and Robert knew, it's a different group of Black employees, and I had a different group of Black employees over here. And me and Robert, we just stayed really close, and I felt that I could talk to Robert about my struggles as a Black person in the organization in leadership, and Robert would understand them. And then once we started talking about that stuff, it was easy to bounce stuff off one another. If more than anything, a lot of the times it was just, like venting to one another, right? But that goes a long way when you're venting to somebody who's the same as you and is facing the same struggles as you, and you're trying to get to a solution. Like I don't just vent to vent, but I vent and then try to get to a solution, because venting, like anybody can just vent. It's just kind of a waste of breath sometimes, in my opinion, sort of, but it's also just a way to pass your trauma on to somebody else. And that's not okay sometimes too, right? So, that's not okay really any of the time, but so we've been really close, and some of the work we've been able to do, like Robert said, when I was managing at this other site in Vancouver, I had a number of Black employees at the site. And I'm going to tell you, and BIPOC employees, I'm going to tell you, I think all of them, except for one or two of them, are managers now. You know what I mean? Yes. And I always will say in the media, I say, oh, I feel like a proud dad, honestly. Like I see, because they're all younger than me, right? And I always say, look at my sons and daughters going off and doing amazing work, and you feel proud, and you feel like like what I was talking about, Vikki, is I didn't want to quit. I wanted to pass that strength, and I feel like I passed that strength. And those folks would reach out to me while they were working. Hey, Kevin, is there any way you could have me come in on a different day and give me some leadership mentoring and stuff? And you know what? Like when people are doing that, Black, white, no matter who you are, if you're going to do that, I'm going to do that for you, because like people have done that for me. It doesn't matter who it was. And I think that kind of stuff is super important. And it's what a lot of space lacks these days, is people mentoring people and helping people and giving people confidence and strength and skills, and that are helping you bring those skills out that you already have. Like you said, Vikki, it wasn't, I understand that white supremacy, the way that stuff breaks down. And I know, all Tara did was bring me to a space, right? You know what I mean? She brought me to a space quicker than I was getting there, if I was getting there regardless. But once I got there, it was just about trying to make a difference in that space. And so me and Robert, we just do everything for one another at work ever since that. Then that was probably 6 or 7 years ago. So we do everything for one another. I don't know. You can just imagine what that looks like in a workplace. And so, yeah.
Vikki, I had to add, like when I saw Kevin at our head office in the boardroom, and I recognize him. But what I did was like I could feel we were the same. I felt the same fear, the same, our body language being uncomfortable in the spaces. And we know we have another friend, she was dealing with the same thing. And a bit of that, like, and I only can speak for myself, but I was thinking it was similar, like that imposter syndrome feeling, right? Because there was no one that looked like us. So when I went over and we talked, you don't know if Kevin will remember, you probably don't, like I made sure that space was really closed, you know, so that it was a private conversation. Cause I was like, it's nobody's business but our own, you know, to be talking about the things that we are, right? Yeah. And so for me, that was really, really big to see somebody that I recognized doing incredibly well, and that we're both here. And, you know, it really connected us in a very different way than anybody else in the room. And I did notice a couple of people when we were talking, like, how do those two know each other? And I'm just like, you will never know unless we share with you, right?
Yeah, most of them still don't know.
They still don't know. And Kevin, we've been able to do such great work over the last little while. Like I'm, like you said, feeling proud. There's so much movement with Black employees into management or even into better positions. It's really interesting. And so all the struggles that we went through, like I can see some of them actually are forgetting their own struggles because they're like, it's being paved, you know? So they just kind of walk in, like even my job that I had out in Chilliwack, you know, it ended up being another Black manager who took over the position, and, you know, he's very confident and enjoying that position. And I'm sitting there going, of course you are, you know, but we paved that space. And then there's some people that were at MFA that when you're there that aren't all now into management as well. And we see them all the time. So I do feel really good. And I feel it's the right thing, even if I struggle with being in this position sometime and my readiness for this position, I still think I have to think about a bigger picture. I think about like Kevin and his kids. We think about all these younger folks that are coming in. This is what they need, you know, like if we don't do it, then who? And I think if we didn't do it at that time, I don't know who else would have done it, you know, because most of the Black employees that are within our age group were even closely left. You know, there was only a few of us left behind. So
I just want to quickly say, like, I mean, the way Robert carries himself within our organization and the things that he does for the kin and the Black folks and the BIPOC. I'll just talk about the Black folks for now. It's for all the BIPOC folks, but for the Black folks, I mean, everybody knows who Robert is. And why does everybody know who Robert is? Because Robert reaches out to everybody, every Black employee. Robert knew. So Robert and I got this group started, this Black affinity group where it's Black folks networking and supporting each other and a safe space that's just a group for Black employees. I'm going to tell you, I didn't know so many of these employees, but Robert knew them. You know what I mean? I mean, Robert knew them, and that meant so much to me that I know that because I had this feeling of, oh my God, there was all these Black folks and I wasn't reaching out to them. I didn't even know them. You know what I mean? So it made me feel so much better to know that they were feeling a bit safer and more confident because I know Robert had been reaching out to them. You know, and just the work that Robert has done in this organization. I mean, it's been tough. Like Robert was here before I was, you know, and it's strange because for a number of years I worked here, I didn't even know Robert worked here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
a few years.
Yeah.
At least 2 years before I started that I didn't even know you worked at Rain City.
I mean, we've been talking about the importance of you being Black men and queer Black men in leadership and with living experience of incarceration and substance in the past and stuff. And the difference that makes for a staff team and making more spaces for others and stuff. What difference does this make for the people you serve, for the people who are coming into housing? Like, we're client-centered here. This isn't just about making stuff better for BIPOC staff. How does this matter on the ground for the people you're so committed to serving?
Totally. Well, with both Kevin and I, you know, have lived experience, you know, and I intersect as queer. We're representing a whole bunch of different types of folks, you know. So like one of the programs that I worked at, there was a trans man that came in and was not feeling comfortable with the program. So, you know, it was one of these discussions that I learned at my last job around, Well, I actually think I learned it from you, Vikki. Times to disclose, like we don't use it all the time because there's privacy, safety, and all these things, but there's times to disclose if it's going to support somebody in a positive way. And so being able to share who I was with this, because I don't always share with folks, right? For safety reasons, sharing that with a person, it was really helpful for them to open up with the rest of the staff. And they also knew that they could come to me if things weren't going well or they were feeling unsafe, that I would support them around those pieces. So, because there's so many different intersects, and I think also just being Black men coming from such an oppressed group, I feel, that we're more open to more things and more types of folks. So like when I'm in the downtown east side, like I remember somebody had said to me, can you work in the downtown east side? Are you going to feel comfortable working there? I was like, what are they talking about? Because for me, walking through downtown is like walking through anywhere else for me. They're going through some of the same struggles I've been through, that I may go through at another point in time. So for me, I don't look at it in the same way. I come from a low-income area in Toronto. I'm just used to people, all types of people. So I think those things are definitely helpful when we're trying to connect with our clients. And I think also what Kevin and I offer, and it's a mixed blessing, because I think from the non-Black community, it's sometimes people are fearful of big Black men. It's this perceived idea of what we're like. But there's another point to it too. It's also where people can feel like they're protected. So if me and Kevin are around and we're dealing with folk, if somebody's going to come in, like I've seen people come and harass, some of our tenants, and I won't get aggressive, but I'll just like, really, and I'll just point blank, and whoever's bothering that tenant will just they'll move along. And I do it in a way that's still like, I'm definitely not going to hurt you, but I'm going to let you know you're not hurting the person that I'm with, right? Let's just all be cool. So it comes with a lot of great qualities. I'm very happy to be who I am. It's very different, like even talking about being in senior leadership and Kevin opening up this program, the perspectives that we have are very different than everyone else's. They don't see it from the angles that we do. So I think it's wonderful. And to be able to have a place to be able to share this and share a different perspective, it's where growth comes, and change comes. So yeah, that's just my perspective on my intersects.
Thanks for that. Okay. And how about for you, Kevin? What kind of difference do you think it makes for the clients?
Yeah, I when you have some lived experience, when I first started, I didn't have to share that experience. People recognize me. Yeah. People that lived in the building, I used to live with on the street, period. Let's just get right there. So when I first started working there, it was different at first, but also right off the hop, it kind of just changed quickly. People were just so, I think they felt just that little bit of hope. They're like, wow. Yeah. They would say to me, hey, what are you doing here? Who are you visiting? But they'd look down and they see that I have the staff keys and the radio. They'd be like, you can't work here, Kev. Just 3 years ago, we were in this place to no, this is what I've done. And I've gotten to this place. It's pretty cool. And they're like, oh, that is so cool. So initially, the first response when most people see me, I think it's a positive experience for them. It gives them some hope, right? Not that some, for lack of better words, like a back alley drug addict like myself, can pull myself up and get into a place where I'm trying to, work with a community that I was a part of and that I am a part of, right? But moving forward, now it's the more, 8-9 years later, I think I understand quite a bit of what tenants' needs are. Yeah. Not everybody's needs are the same. And what I'm able to do with people and what it means to the people is that I'm able to connect with people pretty good. I'm able to get people's needs met if I can in a good, quick, and because I know most people, they want their needs met quick, right? People are like, hey, I need you to do this for me and I need it right now. When I'm at work, I'm okay. So I think about what it is they're asking me. And I think about, some of my skills that I have, and how can I get that need met for that person the quickest and the best and most effective way. And I, a lot of the times I can do that. And I think that's one of the things that the tenants like about me is that just because they tell me something that they might tell another staff, and I've watched it numerous times, that staff is like, oh, yeah, I'm not doing that. Because the staff think that it's not important. I know if the person is asking me something, it's important to them. Right?
Yeah.
And being a person that has had many, many, many struggles, I understand a small little thing is really big to that person in that moment. Yeah. So I think my being in the position that I'm in as a manager, it gives people, they like it because I get those small things done for them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That others might not get done for them because they don't think it's that important. And I'm not saying that the support worker or the whoever or the staff is doesn't care. I mean, they're just not understanding it, I think, in the way that I understand it.
And I'm thinking about the way you're mentoring your workers. They're watching you go the extra mile for a person without having to understand everything. Because the other thing you both know is that people are sometimes lying to you, not because they're liars. It's not safe to tell you shit. So
for sure.
If they tell you they need a fucking bus ticket to see their aunt in a hospital, get them the bus ticket. You don't need to fly. So there's knowledges that you bring, that you're teaching, that your mentor. People are watching you, right? And like one of the things I say is like, people don't listen to how we talk about our ethics. They watch what we do. And when they see you being ethical, everybody says they're client-centered, right? But when they watch you, Kevin, be humble, you could even say, I'm the manager. I don't get fucking bus tickets for anybody. Talk to someone else. You know what I mean? When they watch you do these things, that's the education, right? That's the lateral mentoring, right?
Vikki, can I add one thing? It's a big part too, I think, Kevin, for both of us. Like when I hate even using the term clients, the people. But when we're working with people, they tend to know whether I've shared my history or not. They sense that connection. Yeah. So like if somebody's out there, they'll give me a look and I will look directly back. And it's like there's an understanding that something in our experiences have been the same. Yeah. No matter, even if you're in these management positions, you present different, they know. And I think that's been really helpful in being able to work with people, because then they can trust you. Like there's never anybody that I will pass that I will not look directly in the eye and connect with, because I know they need it. You need to be seen. And I know I want to be seen. So that's really big, where people can understand you, where some people will, I don't think everybody's intentional to be mean, but a lot of people just don't want to look, and they'll pass. I look because I need the person to know that somebody has seen them and can feel what they're going through, right? And Kevin, you bring that as well.
I want to say something real quick, just about an experience I had I think it was the day before yesterday at work. Is a tenant came up to me and I like, that's where, this is what it means. This is everything to me about the work that I do. It's just a simple conversation I had with this person. They said, hey, I just want to let you know, this is what the tenant said to me. You're really busy all the time. I know that. I see you. Like you're going from meeting to meeting. You're walking here with one laptop, sometimes two laptops, sometimes 3 radios, 2 phones. You have nurses chasing you. You're really busy. But I want to tell you, I really appreciate you, and you're really, really nice and good at your job. And you know what? I don't care. I don't need my boss to tell me that. I don't need, it doesn't matter if my boss tells me that. It's nice to hear from the boss. I don't need my coworker to tell me that. I don't need anybody to tell me that. But when a tenant tells me that, that's everything to me, because that's why I go there. That's why I show up. That's when I step out the door and leave my family and I'm going to work, my whole focus changes. I'm going to do my job, and my job is to help folks. And when somebody tells me I'm doing a good job, that's when I feel accomplished, if for lack of better words.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much for that. Look, I just want to make sure we make some time to talk about your responses to the opiate catastrophe, how that's differential in the Black community. And there's been erasure of all of the political deaths and all the Black folks that are suffering this. I'm just wondering, how a lot of your work is tied to the suffering and the oppression of this opiate catastrophe, and just wondering what you wanted to say about that.
So, I'm going to defer to Kevin, just because Kevin, and this is one of the big struggles for me, is not being on the front lines of things. I'm secondary, third of what's really happening. I know what's happening, but there's a disconnect. So for me, then it's not feeling as genuine having that discussion. I think I definitely need to find space to kind of refocus on these bits. But I know for you, especially being out in Surrey, and just where you've kind of connected with over the years, you're always involved to a higher degree than most. So definitely I would defer to you, Mr. Parker.
So I'll tell you, I'll prepare you. Like it's hard. It's already, I'm starting to cry. I'm just going to tell you that right now. It is so hard for me to think about it at times, all the time, actually. It's just hard for me. I mean, my life intersects with this crisis in so many different ways. My personal life, my work life, my life in general is been affected by this crisis in a way that is, I never thought I would be seeing such a thing, or I'd be having to go through something like this. I've lost countless people in my life outside of, the workplace and in the workplace, dozens and dozens. It's 100. I don't know. I can't. It's horrifying, and so much of it is senseless and pointless and not talked about and preventable, and it almost seems intentional and it's horrible, right? But it's affected me quite some. I don't even actually know sometimes how I get through, to tell you the truth. But I do know, because it's people like Robert, you, Vikki. Me personally, I feel very lucky. I have a group that hold me up. And I mean, and if I didn't have that, there's no way I would have, I don't think I'd even be here.
Kevin,
yeah.
So, and just listening to it did make me think, and I'm not that removed, I just realized. So just thinking about disproportionate amount of Black and Indigenous folks as employees that have passed away with the org over the last few years. Like, I think what's happened to me now is, I think we were talking about this earlier in the workshop that we're at, that it's so many. Like, I think when it was like 1, 2, 3, and this is like in 1 year, 1, 2, 3, and when it got to 3 and we're like at June, you're kind of like, you're absorbing it. But then when the numbers kept on increasing, it was like almost every 2 months an employee was overdosing, and passing away. Like, it just got crazy to the point that I think I had to shut everything down, because we were so used to it being, our clients that we work with, to now all of a sudden it's staff. And then when it became disproportionately BIPOC staff, it was kind of like, especially Indigenous and Black, I just didn't know how to absorb the information, because I still don't know why. And then I start thinking, maybe it's our current times and the things that are happening, and people feeling unheard, unsupported. And so, it's created these spaces where this is where things have ended, because for all the years that I've been with our organization, of course, people have passed away. Definitely employees have passed away, but we had such a large number just through the pandemic period that it absolutely, I think it just blew my mind.
Me too.
And I think it may have slowed down, but slowed down means like 3 or 4 months. It doesn't mean a year. And so this is, so I definitely have had some experiences around that, but I'm looking at it from the employee perspective. It's been a lot. Yeah. And we've really not had a good discussion around why, yet. So.
I mean, there's every reason in the world why people put substances in the body. That's never been the issue. You know what I mean? That's never the question that I ever ask. I'm not saying you're asking that, Robert. I'm just thinking.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's more. Vikki, we've talked about this before. What actually infuriates me is, and how tragic it is that you can't put a substance in your body, rightfully so, your own body, without worrying that you might die.
Oh yeah.
Which is strange to me, because I use substances for well over 20 years. And I'm going to tell you, there wasn't a single time where I ever said, hey, I'm going to open this up, or whatever this is, just no, I'm going to put this in my body, and then I might die. I need to be really careful. And if there was a substance like that, somebody had told me, hey, be careful with this, Kev, this is what I heard. This might be a bit strong. honestly, in all the years I was using, I might have known 1 or 2 people to pass away from overdose, period. I know what they're happening, but me, like in my life, I knew 1 or 2 people, and that was over a 20-year period.
Wow.
And that is the honest truth.
Yep.
Me responding on the street for 12 years in the downtown east side, I think 4 times I responded to an overdose. You know what I mean? And obviously it wasn't Narcan, it was just water on somebody, pick them up, throw them in the shower. I don't know. Give them a quick little smack on the cheek. I don't know. We did what we did to try to help people.
Yep.
But there was only a handful over all my years, which tells me how actually tragic it is right now. I mean, when I relate my experience to using substances and the substances that were around then and the substances that are around now. And like my response to it is this, period, is right now I'm in a place where I get to sit at tables and try to make a bit of change. You know what I mean? And like medically, because it's definitely like there's I don't know, there's the solutions that they put forward aren't working. The solutions that we talk about as different providers when we get together in different agencies, like those seems to be the ones that working. I look at evidence-based stuff. I look at what's working, and I try to put that stuff where I'm working. You know, and there's so much struggles. It's like they don't want to, which makes me. I try not to think about it sometimes. It makes me wonder, why wouldn't you want to do that when you know that that's working for those 17 people at this clinic downtown? Why wouldn't you do that? So then it puts me in a place sometimes where I get so angry, right? And I think if you're not angry, there's something wrong with you, period. And I'm going to name that, right? If you know anything about it, and it doesn't have to directly affect you as a human, because as a person, like an individual person, as a human, it's just like I speak to people's families when they call me and they say, hey, what happened to my son, you know, or my daughter or my person? And I tell them, hey, this is what happened. And I've had that conversation hundreds of times over the last number of years. And you know what? That alone is, I can't explain to you how hard that is. Every single time. You know what I mean? My phone rings and I know it's the family or the friend or the partner or the, you know what I mean? Of one of my friends or my tenants or I'm to the point now, honestly, where I'm scared to answer my phone.
Yeah.
Especially if it's from a number that doesn't call me.
Yeah.
And it's because of this crisis.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I have so many people in my life that have intersections with substance use in the past or the present or whatever this or people who are in recovery or people who just party like normal people.
Yeah.
It's filled with fentanyl or whatever. Like just like not saying no, you know what I mean, lack of better words. Just people who party like you just enjoy yourself. You're going to a freaking dance with your friends or a nightclub or something. I don't know. That's what people do. No, yeah, they're supposed to be doing that. You're supposed to be able to enjoy yourself. It's your body, your choice, right? But the choice has been taken away, and that's terrifying to me. And so all I can do at this point is there's a few things I can do. Is I work really close with my colleague Rachel where I work, and we work really close, and she heads the whole department around overdose response. And I've learned so much on how to keep people safe because of this human and the team that she has. I mean that it's hard, but she teaches me tons, and she comes alongside the folks that I work with and the staff, and we get training, and we try to keep people safe the best way we can. And we have numerous different creative methods on how to keep people safe. But you know what? All that, and a tenant said it to me the other day. Another thing a tenant said is, why do we have to do all this? Like, why do we have to have this space to use? Why can't I just use it? You know what I mean? And they're like, and they're saying this, and like, it's saying to me, like, this sucks. Like, I shouldn't have to be this concerned about putting substances in my body. That's what they said to me. And I you know, when people tell me that, I just feel that right here. Like it's, and they're like, this just sucks, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. I could say a million things about it, Vic. You know, this, Robert, this stuff goes really deep for a lot of us. And it's really quite it's really hard.
Kevin, I would add, I know we probably are time restricted, but you know, I'd add every time, like yesterday I was on the bus and somebody came on the bus, and it was a guest of a tenant of one of the buildings that I worked in. And I was just like, he's alive. Oh my God, he's alive. Of course I didn't say anything to him, but I'm sitting behind him and he's in front of me, and I can tell he's looking like, who's this creepy person, staring at me. And I was just like, he's alive, and so this is what I experience, especially now that I'm removed and I'm in senior leadership. Like, I don't know what happened to all of the folks that I've worked with. I was in Tsleil-Waututh and I came back. So every time I see somebody now, it's just like, I'm so happy, and they're probably like, he's crazy. And it's because I'm like, I'm just happy you're still here, so it's that. And I think the impact is just so huge. No matter what we do in our lives, even if you try to separate, there's something, and it sometimes it takes a little bit more thinking, but it's as simple as seeing somebody that you haven't seen in a year or even 6 months to feel so happy that they're still with us, so.
This thing has reached this crisis has reached levels that I thought when I remember when it started, like I was working for absolutely frontline when it started, and like someone on a cut. I seen on your website, Vic, some of the other talks you've done, and those folks were talking on that, and they were on doing these videos with you, and when they were talking, and rewatched the videos, when they were talking about these incidences, that other person that was responding with them was me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That was actually me with Chris and Corey, right? Through all of that stuff. We worked the same shifts, all three of us, right? For all those years, right? So, I mean, it was intense. But I never did I think that it was going to go on this long. I just thought, something's happening here. Like, stuff's going to go away. It's going to get better. The real heroine's going to be back, like, or something, or whatever. And I didn't think that it was going to be like that for 6, 7, 8 years down the road. And I mean, it was really intense at that moment. And I mean, it's only gotten worse. It hasn't gotten any better. It's worse and worse. The statistics.
And Kevin, a big portion of us left. There's only a few of us. Like, most of the staff that I work with, they're gone. So it just makes you wonder, like, what makes you stay? Because we were dealing with so many reversals a day. It was just great. Like, you'd leave the work site and start walking, and somebody'd be like, "You can't leave. We need you to come back." And I was like, "But I've just been here all day." You go back in, and people haven't done training, or they're traumatized. They don't want to do the reversals. So it has never changed. I think I mentioned earlier at the workshop that, I was walking down Princess and it was blocked off. And I didn't think a big deal. I thought it could be anything. And then I'm sure somebody passed away. And it was me just trying to not think that here again, somebody's probably passed away from an overdose,
I think, I just want to reach out to your broken heart, Kevin. This is necropolitics. These are the policies that actually kill people. This is not about addiction. This isn't about substances. This is about, like Donald McPherson says, these are entirely deaths by bad drug policy. This is entirely something that should have been stopped in its first year. And that we got to keep on the pressure, but how do we keep everybody alive till we get there? But I just want to honor the two of you. I really appreciated your vulnerability today. What you've shared, I think, is useful for everybody. And I've also been listening as a person who's been in solidarity with the two of you across time. I'm just so proud to have known you, to be connected in any way to your work. But I also realize that I'm white and there's all kinds of shit you didn't say because I'm here. And I can imagine with this conversation, if it was just the two of you and wasn't being recorded, would be very different. So I want to let you know I know that. And just thank you so much for being so gracious and honored. I'm just so honored to know you. I'll just take a second to say, Robert, I met you in a college course I was teaching. And the reason we got connected is I just thought you're one of the brightest lights that I ever saw in college. I was like, that's one of the people that's going to change the world. And he's a fucking genius. And anti-Black racism has kept everybody from seeing this, right? There were other things going on, as there always are in colleges. And then Kevin, I met you when I did a team day for your team. You were a peer worker. And at the break, I went to your manager and said, that guy is your team lead. And they said, no, he's just a peer worker. And I was like, that guy is leading this team. I don't care what your organizational structures. And my guess is that all of the residents in the building, that's the guy. So that's your guy. So anyway, that was my knowing of both of you started with me kind of coming in and being blown away by you. And it's been decades and decades, and I such respect. And for both of you, and I really honor you speaking here in particular around the part of your identity as Black men and fighting anti-Black racism, and how you do that makes more space for everyone else in the world and more justice and just big respect.
So Vikki, I know you're probably going to be uncomfortable hearing this, and both Kevin and I definitely, and I can speak for Kevin for this one, we don't say this to everybody at all, but I've always considered you an ally. You know, like you just were able to just see me and help me. You know, there was no, and I hadn't felt that prior to coming out. So I just need to let you know, because we know like allyship is not something somebody says, well, I'm an ally, but I can tell you, you are an ally to me. And I can say that for Kevin, because I know Kevin is thinking the same thing. So, yeah.
Okay, well, look, thanks so much for having this conversation. This is great. I really appreciate you guys doing this.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Vic.
Yeah,
All right.
Thanks, Kevin.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.